I fear that we as a country are drowning in a sea of debt. The deficit is the issue that motivates me to run for office. So we think we have a really good practical chance of bringing more liberty-minded people to Washington, and we really think it's going to happen. I think one of the things, and this is an undercurrent in the Tea Party movement and some of the other movements, is that people are really upset that their congressmen vote on bills that are 1,100 pages thick and don't read them. There is legislation, and I will support it and introduce it, that says you have to sign a document and say you've read the bill before you vote on it. I think these are reform-minded issues that bring new people to our movement. We sometimes think we're getting a change. You know, we elected a change in 1994. We elected Republicans to Congress for the first time in 40 years, and they were elected on the contract with America. The contract with America had many good things in it, but it didn't take long for them to forget about it. By 1996, they had a new strategy, and actually it was a Republican from Texas who coined the name for this strategy. It was called the K Street strategy. And K Street is where all the lobbyists live. All their businesses are on K Street. And this particular Republican from Texas went around and said to the Republicans in-house, we will stay in power if we do like the Democrats did. We go down to K Street and we get the money in buckets from the lobbyists. We give them what they want, and we will stay in power. Power became more important than the principle of what we wanted to do, to bring limited government, to balance budgets, to bring responsible constitutional government.
This is Rand Paul here visiting in Austin, Texas, running for the U.S. Senate from Kentucky. Glad to be with you today. I'm an ophthalmologist. I do eye surgery and have practiced for 16 years in Bowling Green. I came to Kentucky because my wife grew up in Kentucky and is from a small town near there called Russellville. For many years I've been involved with the taxpayer movement. I headed up a group in Kentucky called the Kentucky Taxpayers United, and we rated the state legislature on their tax and spending votes, and we produced a scorecard so people could see how their legislators were voting. We also promoted a pledge called the Taxpayer Pledge, where candidates would sign saying that they promised not to vote to raise taxes. I've already signed that pledge for my campaign. In fact, I've gone one step further. I've said that I pledge not to vote for any budget that's not balanced, whether it's a Republican budget or a Democrat budget. I think we should decide things not on whether they're a Republican or Democrat, but whether they're good or bad. And I think our budget being so far out of whack is bad for the country and will lead to repercussions on all of us as we go to the grocery store and pay higher and higher prices. I believe that government is best that governs least. I think that government has grown so large that we're in danger of losing our freedoms. I think the debt has grown so large that we're drowning in a sea of debt. And if we don't do something, I think the problems will be imminent and serious. I think the problems with the debt are not only that our kids and our grandkids will be paying for the debt, the problem is that we're going to be paying for it through serious inflation. We doubled the monetary base last year, and when that money leaks out through the banking system into the economy, my fear is that we're going to have significantly higher prices and potentially chaos within the system if we're not careful. Thomas Paine said, during the Revolutionary War, he said, "These are the times that try men's soul." I think that we're in a similar period of time in the sense that there's an unease. I think there's a discontent across the land. People are coming more and more, not just people from the liberty movement, but everyday people within every aspect of my life. I see these people come into the office and they're worried. They're worried about our country. They're worried about what's going to happen. They're worried about the currency. They're worried about the debt. They're worried about we're a country that doesn't manufacture anything anymore. We're worried that our leaders tell us, go to the mall and spend your money and everything will be okay. People are seeing through that and people are worried. So I think there is an unease. I think the discontent is also seen in the Tea Party movement. People spontaneously showing up. In my little town of 50,000 people, we had 700 people show up for a Tea Party. And it wasn't Republican or Democrat organizers. These were regular folks that most of them were independents. Most of them were people who had not participated in the political process before. So there is a discontent out there. What we need to do is capture that, run candidates for office who will represent the people, and try to take back our government. My opponent in the Republican side is the Secretary of State. He's a career politician. He's a young man who's not done anything really other than run for political office. In fact, recently we've done pretty well in a poll against him, and we've only been doing this for 3 months, and he's been doing it for 8 years. So we really see that there is a discontent. I tell people that as I meet the Republican primary voter in Kentucky, I've yet to meet one voter who would have voted for the bank bailout. But the Republican leadership, over half of them voted for the bank bailout. So I think there's a disconnect. I think the Republican primary voter is ready for a different type of candidate, not a career politician. I'm a physician, I'm a small businessman, and I don't want to go into this for a living. I go into this because I'm worried about our country, worried about the debt, and worried about the repercussions that are coming. Yesterday we had what's called a money bomb, and we had over 5,000 people contribute money to our campaign. We raised $450,000 in 24 hours. This is phenomenal. It shows that the liberty movement is alive and well. We did this in 24 hours online, and we think we set a record for Kentucky. No other candidate in Kentucky has ever raised this much money online in a 24-hour period. It also brings us up to parity with the establishment candidate, and it allows us to be considered to be a competitive force and a formidable candidate. I've come down here to Texas also, and we're having fundraisers in Texas. We will raise money from across the country as well as from Kentucky. We're also scheduling fundraisers in Kentucky, and we'll raise money within Kentucky as well. But the issues resonate throughout the country, and the issues of limited government and less taxation and less regulation, bringing the budget back into balance, looking at the Federal Reserve and saying we've got to audit the Federal Reserve. We need to know where they're spending the money, what they're doing it with. The Federal Reserve increased their asset sheet by $2 trillion, meaning they bought up all these loans. The Federal Reserve bought used car loans and bad home mortgages last year. 40% of what the Federal Reserve is buying right now, neither you nor I would purchase. Would you purchase your buddy's bad car loan lives down the street from you? No way. But the Federal Reserve is doing this, and we don't even know how they're doing it because they won't let us audit the Federal Reserve. It's now 270 co-sponsors for auditing it, and yet we still don't have a vote. So we have to keep pushing on. The liberty movement needs more candidates. We need to keep calling and writing all our congressmen and senators to get the audit bill through. Recently, they've been talking about who they want to replace Bernanke with or whether he'll get the job again. I think the discussion should be, let's don't replace him at all. And even if you didn't immediately abolish the Fed, abolish some of the powers of the Fed. Is there any reason why the Fed should set the day-to-day interest rate? I see the interest rate as kind of like insulin in the body. When you eat a big meal, your insulin rises, tamponades the blood sugar, and it brings it back to a maintenance level. We call that homeostasis. It's sort of an equilibrium that always finds its balance when the body's working properly. The economy's the same way. When it gets overheated and there's 100 new home builders building houses, the competition for money will drive the interest rate higher. The economy slows gradually a little bit, and then when it grows to a point, interest rates fall and the economy will pick back up again. But if you have the Federal Reserve make the interest rate zero, you get this artificial boom, and there is no check and balance. If the interest rate isn't allowed to rise, the economy keeps getting overheated and overheated. That's how we got into this mess. But we're getting into another mess now because we've got the interest rates at zero. We're telling everybody, go out and buy another car. Bring in your old car. We'll give you $4,500 for it, but you need to borrow $20,000 more to buy the new car. So everybody becomes more indebted. And as a country, that's not good. It's sort of this mentality, go to the mall, spend your money, and everything will be okay. It doesn't make any sense to you individually, and it can't make any sense for an economy. I think it's a little scary in our country that we're doing what's called political profiling. You know, people were worried about profiling people for the color of their skin. Now we're profiling people for the color of their thoughts. You know, what are you thinking? Do you believe in something really scary like the Constitution? You might be a dangerous person. It actually said in that report out of Missouri, the Missouri Department of Homeland Security said, if you believe in the Constitution or supported Ron Paul or Bob Barr, you might be a terrorist. So something so benign and something you would think so wholesome as believing in our country's founding document has now been turned on its head, and we're the ones to be investigated. I think times of crisis is when we have to worry the most about things. You know, Rahm Emanuel, who's a chief advisor to President Obama, said, "Let no good crisis go past without allowing government to grow. These are our chances for government to grow stronger and for more security at the expense of liberty." And it's happened before. When you have severe crisis, that's when sometimes strong leaders arise. You know, you had the money destroyed in Germany in 1923, and out of that chaos came Hitler, who promised that these awful people were the ones doing this to you, and we need to round them up and put them in camps. And the liberties just went out the window, but people actually democratically voted in a Hitler. And I worry about that again in our country. If the money is destroyed in our country, could we get a time where a strong leader comes forward and says, "We just need security. I'll make you safe, but just give me your liberty. Give me your liberty and I'll make you safe again." And unfortunately, some people accept that, but we have to remember what Ben Franklin said. He says, those who trade their liberty for security will have neither. And that's an important maxim to remember, is that you never get both. And it's hard to get your liberty back once you've given it up.
Talk about the reports that we're hearing, like Obama supporters are going out and they even set up a tattletale line at one point to people who criticize Obama and kind of turn him in. They've since stopped that particular piece, but how does that what is that?
Do they have brown shirts on? Is there a youth patrol that talking about hate speech? Well, I did watch one of the announcers the other day, and they were saying, here's the poll. Do you think if you criticize President Obama that it's hate speech? Well, for goodness sake, criticism of a political figure and they're going to call it hate speech, that's a dangerous sign that freedom of speech may be under attack next if we have to be careful about what we say. And so, no, I think criticism is what makes the country great, and that puts, the leaders should have to defend what they're doing. That's why the town hall process is good. I was talking with my brother on the way down here, and we were talking about how his congressman at the town hall only accepted questions on cards, and then the county chairman screened them, and 40% of them were taken out. So only friendly questions were allowed. You couldn't raise your hand. So that's what it's going to come to. If they do town halls at all, they're going to have screened questions because they're becoming fearful that the people might ask them a hard question.
How do you feel about this uprising, seeing the people and these aren't like kids, protesting that are in college. These are adult working people.
I think it goes back to what we talked about there being an unease upon the land, a discontent that's growing and festering, and that the Obama administration's gone too far to the left too quickly, and they want to take over health care, they want to take over cap and trade, they want to do all these things so fast that I think there is a backlash forming, and it's not really coming very well very much, I think, from the Republican Party. I think it's more spontaneous, that people are just showing up and they're unhappy, but they want an alternative. For example, with health care, they don't want someone just to oppose Obamacare. They want someone to say, what do we do? How do we make health care better? And it's not just access, it's expense. I hear more complaints about how much people spend on their health insurance than I do about access. But I have a plan that I've been promoting that I think would transform things. We need to make health insurance more like term life insurance. When you buy term life insurance, you buy it over many years. So for example, I have term life insurance and it's a 20-year contract, and I'm halfway into it. But if I have a heart attack because of all these stressful questions today and I survive, my term life insurance stays the same. I'm on a 20-year contract. But if I have a heart attack this year or tonight, but I survive, when my health insurance expires this year, they'll double my rates. I have a very high deductible, and my health insurance still went up 17% last year. So even people who are part of the healthcare system, I'm a physician, recognize that the costs are rising rapidly, and I know people are unhappy about that. But my question is are the prices rising because we have too much capitalism in healthcare or too little capitalism? I would make the point that we have very little capitalism. We have private ownership, and I make a profit, and it's privately done, but the prices don't fluctuate. In true capitalism, the price should fluctuate. So when you go and buy things like a cell phone, they're incredibly cheap. Every day they're cheaper, but there's many people producing them and the prices float, and you can choose your product on price. If you come to me as a doctor and you're over 65, the government sets the price. Everybody charges the same across the country, so you can't choose your doctor or your procedure based on price. And a lot of medicine is elective. It's hard to choose your doctor when you're having a heart attack, but if you have elective surgery or you're having your tonsils out or having something done that's elective, you could choose things on price, but you can't. They also make surgery centers very hard to open, so everything's done in the hospital. But if you had surgery centers, all of a sudden you'd have more competition. So there are a lot of ways to bring competition into healthcare, but we're not talking about them because all we're talking about is injecting more government into healthcare. Well, I mean, the first sort of thing you see with martial law is mandates, and they're talking about making it mandatory. I worry because the last flu vaccine we had in the 1970s, more people died from the vaccine than died from the swine flu. I think you have to use your brain, but I think every individual should be allowed to make that choice. For example, 20 years ago, my parents gave me smallpox vaccine, and I would do it again. You know, smallpox was an awful disease, and the vaccine wiped smallpox out of civilization, basically. The only people left with it are bioterrorism labs that have smallpox. I would have also taken the polio vaccine. I know a lot of people had polio, and we stopped it. But am I going to take the swine flu vaccine? Unlikely, until I'm certain that it's safe, and I'm not going to have my kids take it until I know it's safe. But I'm not absolutely saying that I won't take the vaccine, but I say you have to be careful. You have to weigh the risks of the disease versus the risks of the vaccine. But I'm not going to tell people who think it's a bad idea that they have to take it, because everybody should be allowed to make their own healthcare decisions. And that's the problem with allowing more and more government. There was a vaccine about 3 years ago for rotavirus. It's a diarrhea type virus for children. They started giving the vaccine, but kids started dying from a blockage in their intestine, which they linked to the vaccine, but it took them 6 months to figure this out. And meanwhile, they had already talked about making it mandatory. The whole problem is not necessarily good versus bad on vaccines. It's whether it should be mandatory or the individual makes the decision. And sometimes you want to not be the first one to get a new procedure. You want to see if it works well before you choose. Well, the way the freedom movement can get involved and help me is through visiting our website, randpaul2010.com. And the liberty movement is mobilized. We're getting people within Kentucky already distributing literature. We've given out over 10,000 pieces of literature so far. We've had our first poll, and it shows us dead even with the leading Democrat and within striking distance of the leading Republican. So we're excited about what's going on, and if the liberty movement will mobilize, this is an election we can win.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.